Free Trader Beowulf calling anyone. Mayday, mayday, we are under attack. Main drives down, are gone. Turret number 1 is down. Not responding. Mayday, anyone out there, this is my last call. Anyone, please help. This is Free Trader Beowulf. Mayday, mayday. What's up, Internet? This is Jay with Nerd Rage Against the Machine, and I'm here with another RPG review. This time, we're reviewing Traveler by Mongoose Entertainment. This is Traveler's 2nd edition. There are multiple versions of Traveler. Traveler has been around forever. It, in a lot of ways, is kind of the science fiction answer to Dungeons & Dragons as fantasy. Thought of as a generic game, much like D&D thought of as generic at the same time. You know, Ravenloft and Dragonlance Greyhawk are not really generic. Yes, you can, of course, ignore Greyhawk, Dragonlance, and the rest of it and just build your own world. And the same thing is true with Traveler. However, that world is a good part of the game. Traveler takes place in a standard science fiction universe where players will be exploring, trading, fighting, and pretty much anything that you can think of that a good sci-fi RPG would have you do. One of the big things this game is known for is life path system. So when you build a character, it's 2d6 through 6 stats: strength, endurance, dexterity, intelligence, education, and social standing. Those 6 stats can also be used to make what's called a UPP, or Universal Player Profile, which is a 6-digit code using hexadecimal, so that you can just have that right on the sheet in a very small shorthand. That was something Traveler was big on back in the day. Mongoose Traveler doesn't really focus on that, but it was kind of a cool little idea. On top of that, though, once you've built your character, then you roll or choose a career for him. Then you roll his life path. Now, in the earliest versions of Traveler, this was kind of known for the fact that once you hit a career, you had to roll a survival check. And if you failed, you died. That's right, dying in character creation. The new edition does not actually have that. Instead, you would roll a complication if you fail. There are Iron Man rules as an alternative that will allow you to do just that, to die during character creation, but for the most part, the new system kind of eschews that for a more playable feel. From there, the game uses a very simple system. It's 2d6. Each stat gives you a modifier, and basically you're going to try to hit target numbers. You get skills. That's also part of that character creation. Now, the one thing that's cool about that life path and character creation is that those survival checks kind of become a gambling situation of, you know, how many skills do I want? Well, how many times are you willing to put yourself out there is really what it comes down to. And with this newer version of Traveler, there are an expansive amount. I recall playing the original Traveler, and there was, you know, basically like, you know, the Navy, the Marines, the Army, Scout Service. There's about 6 or 7 of them. In this game, you've got closer to 20, and they range the gamut from criminal organizations to civilian organizations, which does make for a lot more opportunities. On top of that, the game gives you a lot to work with. There's also starship rules, very, very in-depth starship rules. There are rules for making your own species, but there are species and an entire background that is here already. The Third Imperium is very well tracked and very well organized. Ships move by jump a location, and when you build a ship or when you have a ship, that jump is basically how many of those hexes on the star map you can actually go across. Each planet is different. This is an empire ruled by an imperium, but it's also so massive that really the empire is there almost more as a suggestion. It's not the oppressive empire of something like Star Wars or Warhammer 40k. This is a much more, yes, we all use the imperial standard. How much we use it is kind of up to us. Production-wise, this edition of Traveler also comes in two versions. One is the typical hardback RPG rulebook, which gives you everything you need. And I do mean everything. This is basically your core book. There are supplements, which will, of course, expand on that, but that's all you need. The additional way to go would be this guy. This is the starter set. Now, unlike a lot of RPG starter sets, this is not a breakdown, let's learn how to play. This is literally the same books. The only difference is it comes with a map of the galaxy, of course, and a blank map for those who want to use it, a set of dice, and the same material, just in cut around 2 books. Specifically, in this case, Characters in Combat and Starships and Worlds. There's a third book, which is an introductory module called The Fall of Tinouth, as well as pre-generated characters. There's about 6 of these in the box. Again, everything you need to start the game. This is not, though, an intro kit like most RPGs. This is pretty much everything you need. One nice thing about having this at the table is that you can have those books in divided content so that players can look at them. If, say, someone's looking at Starship Rules, there's still a Characters in Combat on the table for them. Meanwhile, the GM has his hardback. Rules-wise, it is a very simple system. I think I've said that before. Combat is a breeze. It is also lethal. One of the things is that your hit points are basically your physical statistics. So once you lower all those physical statistics to 0, your character is dead. It is not a game of that kind of 0 to hero leveling that we talked about with D&D. This game actually does your character starts to weaken as they get older. Very realistic in that respect. And a lot of different things you can do with it. This is a game that is really a sandbox for players who want a good sci-fi game. The newer editions do feel a little more like D20 with that this stat equals this modifier shtick, but it's not terrible. There is also a ton of material. One other neat thing that Traveler has done is, for the most part, between this Traveler 5 and the first edition of Mongoose Traveler and the other 4 editions that were put out by GDW and other ventures by Mark Miller, there is a metric ton of material. I mean, I would almost argue that this rivals Dungeons and Dragons for the sheer amount of stuff that you can find on the internet. In fact, Mongoose even did publish some established world versions. Like, there is a Judge Dredd rulebook for those who would like to use the Traveler rules to emulate Judge Dredd. There's also a series of Babylon 5 storybooks for that same cause. And there are people who have, hacked and jimmied their own versions of Star Trek, Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, and their own races, their own species, their own planets, their own galaxies. This really is a great toolbox game for that very reason. And that's not to include the actual official material that is available for this edition. The game has not morphed horribly as some have. Like, say, as an example, and I'm not saying these are bad games, but if you look at like Legend of the Five Rings, when it went from Alderac Entertainment to Fantasy Flight Games, the entire mechanic changed. So a lot of that material would be much tougher to bridge over. In this case, for the most part, yeah, I could take stuff from the old 70s Judges Guild books and bring them into my modern Traveler campaign with limited work, which again is another great thing. And there is a ton of resources online as well. I would recommend this game, especially for someone looking for a generic sci-fi RPG. It is, or at least one that's fully fleshed out. I know a lot of people are pushing towards Starfinder right now because of its connection to Pathfinder and that D&D mechanic. This is a different mechanic. That is probably the one thing about it. But again, it's also a very well-loved mechanic. I've had a ton of fun in multiple adventures in this game. It is a more grounded sci-fi. It is not your Star Wars, Leroy Jenkins, blasters ablazing kind of game as much as it is think before you leap. But you can have a ton of fun with this, and it is a very flexible game, and there's a lot of material. I'm going to give this one 5 out of 5, and may all your rolls be crits, and happy gaming.